Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining. We'll just wait a few more minutes for a few more people to join. Use the time to grab a coffee, some water, stretch your legs, or take the time to actually look away from the screen. And then in 2 to 3 minutes, we'll get started with our webinar. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. We're looking forward to this webinar. And with that said, I'll hand over to Fiona.
Hello, thank you, Jan. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining the webinar today. I'm Fiona, I'm Brand and Content Manager at Lifesize, and I'll be hosting today's webinar along with Jan, who you've obviously already met, who's our Strategic Director. We're excited that this is our first ever brand webinar. Lifesize has over 10 years experience crafting visual identities for clean tech companies, so we do know and understand a bit about how to take complex technology and turn that into a compelling brand. So whether you're thinking about embarking on a brand refresh or you're a startup at the very beginning of your journey, we hope this webinar provides some clarity for you on what you would like your brand to stand for. We've included practical exercises throughout, which we'll run through together. So we encourage you to have an open mind and get involved. We always like to get to know one another a bit at the beginning of the webinar. And also it's a chance for us to check if the technology is working. So you should see a Q&A box on the screen. So if you want to tell us your name, where you're from, or where you're based at the moment, and what your favorite brand is. You can even tell us why that's your favorite brand if you like. But in the meantime, I'll run through some housekeeping and our agenda. So today we'll be talking about what a brand is. And I'll be taking you through that section and why you need to ask why. Then we'll talk about how to find your brand attributes, defining your value proposition, which is Jan's area of expertise, so he'll run through that. And then we'll talk a little bit about how you actually kind of put this into practice and start living your brand. And finally, we'll end with a Q&A. So yeah, if you have any questions throughout, then you can also just type them as we go, and we can try our best to answer them, or we'll Lee, who's in the background doing technical support, will actually try and let us know or field your questions. But we do have the Q&A at the end. And if you do experience any technical issues, put them into the chat box. And as I said, Lee's in the background. He should be able to give you some support and help resolve those issues as quickly as possible. So before we get started, we'll just have a look and see if anyone has let us know about their favorite brand.
Well, we have Craig here from Milton Keynes. So hi, Craig. Glad that you could join our webinar. And if we have anyone else wanting to share what their favorite brand is and why, please let us know.
Okay, I think we don't have any other answers, although if they come through, we can.
Yeah, let's get started.
Yeah, but it seems the Q&A is working, at least for Craig. So, so yeah, the first part we're going to talk through is what is a brand and why do I need one? So when people think about brand, they often think about the biggest and best known brands in the world, and quite often their logo will come to mind straight away. So yeah, think about the famous Nike tech, the Tesla T, or the McDonald's arch. But a brand is much more than a logo. A brand is the entire experience someone has of your company. It's the story, motivation, and personality behind your business, and it should inform everything you do. Of course, this is all can be communicated through how your company looks, but it's also about the story you tell on your website, the style you choose to communicate in, and the principles you're built on, and most importantly, the vision you're working towards. So the reason that those logos might come to mind is actually because all those companies I mentioned have done their branding very well, and most people do understand very quickly what their vision and mission is. So brand is essential for your company to be successful. And by creating a solid brand, you can position yourself as a market leader, you can attract the right employees, and you can build confidence with investors, amongst other things. Sorry, don't want to click there. So most importantly, it allows you to connect with your customers emotionally so that you can begin to form a trustful relationship with them. So at the core of how Lifesize engages with its clients is the Simon Sinek why methodology. So as he says in his now famous TED Talk, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. So through what he calls the golden circle, which you can now see on the screen, he explains that all organizations know what they do. Some know how they do it, but very few actually know why they do what they do. So the why is your purpose, it's your cause, and it's why you exist. So starting with why is a concept that consumer brands understand very well. If you think of the most successful brands in the world today, they put their why front and center. So we're just going to run through a couple of examples to help illustrate this. One of our favorite consumer brands at Lifesize is Patagonia. Most people can tell you very quickly what Patagonia's core values are, why they exist, what they stand for. That's because they've built an incredible brand, and the core of that brand is their why. So if Patagonia sold what they do, it would be high quality outdoor gear. Obviously, yeah, they do that, but they in fact sell purpose. So their products, which cause as little harm to the environment as possible, are intended to facilitate consumers' outdoor experiences. It connects them with the natural world and feeds back to their greater desire to protect the environment. So Patagonia allows everyday consumers to actually be part of a movement, one whose purpose is to protect the planet. And their mission statement encompasses their why perfectly. We're in business to save our home planet. So we'll move on to another example that is a bit more tech, a bit more B2B focused, because obviously B2B is slightly different. So at Lifesize, we use Slack to communicate across our remote team, which is located all over Europe. It's one of the most successful software startups of the last 10 years. It gives businesses around the world the ability to organize workflows to facilitate seamless instant communications. So if Slack sold their what, it would be simply a business communication platform, but instead Slack sells collaboration. So by keeping effective collaboration at the core of why they exist, they're able to fulfill their mission to make life work simpler, more pleasant, and more productive, which is their mission statement. So let's go back to the golden circle. Sorry. If we focus on the what, we might answer the following questions. What does our technology do? What's the route to market? What investment have we raised? If we move on to the how, we might talk about how we outperform our competitors, or how exactly we're going to achieve our goals. Obviously, these are all very important questions, but they don't mean much unless they're accompanied with a why. It doesn't matter if you've broken performance barriers with your technology, if your audience doesn't understand why your technology matters in the first place. So in communicating with the outside world, you have to go inside out, sorry. So you have to start with why, discuss how, and end with what. So I'm going to pass back on to Jan, but I think he might be having, oh, sorry, you're back.
Perfect. Right. So I was just saying that Patagonia is like a company that we all know, and they have easy to understand products and services. So it might just be simpler for them, right? But we want to show you that, of course, you as a clean tech company with novel revolutionary technologies can also apply the same principles that Fiona has just presented. And we want to illustrate that and have founded a imaginary company called PowerKite. The company was founded in 2011 in Glasgow and will celebrate its 10-year anniversary this year during COP26 later this year. Now, PowerKite's 15 employees have developed something quite cool, a wing with generators mounted on top of it to produce electricity in high altitudes. As Scotland is Europe's windiest country, the prerequisites are perfect to commercialize the technology there. We want to show you how you can apply those 3 principles that Fiona has just presented to your organization. And let's use the fictional company PowerKite again. When people talk about the company, they mention often the what. In PowerKite's example, they manufacture kites to produce green electricity from wind in high altitudes. Assessing in order to fulfill the organization's purpose, the Scottish Airborne Wind Energy Company has invented novel materials, designed a unique kite, and developed highly automated software to steer the kite. And I just talked about purpose as well, right? That is the central question behind why. Why do you do what you do? What's your contribution to the planet? What is it that you actually sell? And in the case of PowerKite, the wing and the technology they have developed are only a means to an end. PowerKite sells the possibility to produce affordable green electricity everywhere. And that's a very different description compared to the company's what. If you remember that again, the company's what is to produce kites and to produce green electricity from wind and high altitudes. But their why ultimately is to produce the green electricity everywhere, no matter where. And that is a very, very different need. We'll get back to that later again when we talk about the value proposition. But we want to encourage you to have a think about how you can implement this structure for your organization.
Thanks, Jan. So yeah, and that's the first big step towards building an authentic brand, is actually sitting down with your team and fleshing out why your company exists. So we want to talk through the next step in the branding process, which is to think about your brand attributes. So brand attributes are the core values that define the overall nature of your company and represent the essence of your brand. They're a unique set of characteristics that identify the character and personality traits of your brand in the market, but also in the minds of your customers. Alongside your why, your company personality will be the foundation of your brand. So your brand attributes will inform your messaging development by determining your brand's tone of voice. For example, perhaps your brand attributes include words like bold or pioneering. The messaging developed will likely be pretty confident and make big statements using language which positions the company as a current or aspiring industry leader. And the brand attributes will also inform your visual identity. So when you work with designers, they will thank you for providing these descriptive words alongside your mission and vision statements. So using the same example as above, a designer might choose to use very bright colors, which convey confidence. The attributes are a great way of helping your creative team understand exactly who you are and the type of image you're trying to portray to customers. So we've come up with a foolproof exercise to establish your brand attributes quickly and efficiently. So the idea of this exercise is to end up with 3 words which perfectly describe your company and use these to inform all of your communication efforts. So basically, I'll describe a little bit what this exercise is, and then Jan and I are actually going to run through that with the imaginary Scottish company PowerKite. So the idea is to get all your team together, or as many of the team as possible, and spend 5 minutes getting everyone to write down as many adjectives they can think of to describe the company. So I think what's helpful here is to think about the words you would use to describe a friend or a person. So that will automatically help you shift away from words which are quite overused in the industry. So once you've done that, I say only 5 minutes, and take turns to put the words up on a wall and read them out as you go, and maybe give some context as to why you chose that word. And as each person adds their words, you can try and group them into kind of similar words. And once they're all up, it's time to bring them down. So basically, we're going to start calling them. It's important to take your time, go easy, don't be tempted to skip ahead to the three you just immediately like best, and try and get rid of words which are necessary to being a business, like efficient or profitable, and then also words that are overused, as I said, maybe things like innovative or sustainable. And so this is one of our favorite workshops to do with clients. It's a fantastic way for us to get to know the character of the clean tech companies and we're working with, and it's very rewarding to actually see this lively discussion take place. So now we're going to run through this, as I say, for PowerKite.
Cool. Thank you, Fiona. So we've already collected 12 possible brand attributes that came up during our workshop with PowerKite. And the key challenge now, as Fiona has pointed out, is to choose the three brand attributes that are most relevant to PowerKite's business. And Fiona and I will go through them now and show that how we normally facilitate this process. Let's start with the easy options, maybe that we can disregard. And Fiona already mentioned it, that there are a few terms that don't really work when describing a friend, for example. So novel materials is a term that you wouldn't use to describe a person. So that one can actually go. Also, Fiona said there are some words that are just overused, such as innovative. So that's another one that we would immediately disregard, because if you need to point out that you're innovative,
so I'm going to have a look now. I think what I would remove next is maybe grounded, because while that's kind of an attractive trait in a person, it's not maybe quite right, just because this is an airborne wind energy company. So when thinking about like the visual identity and maybe the core words to associate with PowerKite, I would say grounded maybe doesn't quite fit. And I would also remove strong, because I think it's quite similar to durable, and perhaps in a clean tech sense, durable might be more is more descriptive. And I would also remove adventurous, or perhaps have a further discussion about this, because it's quite contrasting to pragmatic. And I think I prefer energetic, because it kind of has similar connotations, and it has a double meaning in this context, because obviously this is an energy firm.
Great. So now we're down at least to 7 attributes. So we still have 4 to go that need to go. And let's look at impactful. Again, I would argue, how unique is that to a clean tech company, and how, or would you actually use it to describe a friend as impactful? I would say that there are better options on the screen, so we can let go of impactful. Next, I would look at persistent. I would say it's quite close to dedicated. So then the question is just around which one do you like better, and which one do you feel works better for PowerKite? From my perspective, dedicated feels a bit less stubborn and a bit more positive compared to persistent. So I would let go of persistent at this stage.
Great. So only 2 left to remove. So I think at this stage, it's, you can start thinking of like what combination of words works quite well as well. I think I would next remove durable, even though it was better than strong. I think it's not descriptive enough in terms of like a personality. Again, you would describe a friend as durable. And I think then I would I think it would be a toss-up between reliable and dedicated, perhaps. I think dedicated is really nice because it also kind of conveys the mission slightly, like this kind of dedication to the green energy being available to everyone and kind of not stopping until that's possible. And so I think I would remove reliable. So now we have 3 left.
And voila, our 3 brand attributes. And we encourage you, as Fiona also said before, to get together with the whole team, as many as possible from as many departments as possible to do this exercise. You will find that the views might be quite different and the discussions might be quite energetic and powerful around which words are the best ones to describe your company. But this is really the purpose of this workshop exercise, to have those discussions and get to the bottom of things as they lay the foundations for your brand. We also want to recommend great online tools at this stage, because we all know that it can be still challenging to get together physically. So there are great online tools such as Miro that can help you facilitate this process, even when you can't be physically together in one room to do the digital vision instead.
Yeah.
Now let's have a look at the value proposition, and we'll get back to the brand attributes at a later stage. But let's have a look at another important topic, the value proposition. It's actually something that a lot of companies and organizations struggle with, that takes a lot of patience and experience, as well as courage to be bold and ambitious about it. And before we jump into what PowerKite's value proposition could be, let's have a look at what the value proposition actually is. So it's your unique identifier. It's what makes your company different, what makes your audience choose to work with you over a competitor, and it encompasses your why, the core of your company and why you exist. And often the why will most likely cover your vision, but the value proposition really delves deep into the problem that you want to solve for your audience and the world, and what makes you the right person, the right company for the job. And when crafting your value proposition, it's vital to always bear your target audience in mind. So we have a number of questions to help you start with the process. It can be a question like, who is your target customer and what is their why? What are they driven by? What challenges do they face? What is your product or service offering or messaging will resonate with them and inspire them to work with you? And all these questions we tend to ask during a workshop. But again, we want to show you how this can be done. And knowing these answers to these questions is central, not just to building your value propositions, but to building your overall brand and communications efforts. Let's have a look at the customers and your audience a bit more, because as I just pointed out the questions, I think this is one of the crucial and fundamental bits of how to define your value proposition. And well, getting to know your customer can be a challenge. What we recommend is to use personas for that work. Personas are fictional, generalized representations of your ideal customers, and really understanding your personas can be and is crucial to sharpening your value proposition and finding the right messaging. And if you want to know more about personas, how to work with them, what to think about, and how we at Lifesize go about it, I really recommend you to watch the webinar 5 again that you find on our YouTube channel, where Fiona talks a lot more about working with personas. Again, we look at our Scottish airborne wind energy company, PowerKite. You to understand how we go about this, and for that we have shaped 4 dimensions. Those 4 dimensions are: what does your customer need? What is their challenge? How do you address that challenge? And which additional value do you provide? Let's have a look of how this plays out for PowerKite. PowerKite's customers need green electricity. The problem, there was no technology that produces green electricity constantly in remote locations. Well, until now. PowerKite introduces a solution that is a new form of energy production, harnessing wind and steady wind in high altitudes. That's how PowerKite addresses the problem. And additionally, PowerKite does not just only produce the electricity, they are also able to store the electricity in a battery that comes with the container that the kite is shipped in. Now, these 4 steps bring you much closer to your actual value proposition, and we recommend using the structure, again, discussing it as a team and noting down 3 to 4 bullet points for each aspect. This will make a strong difference for you in shaping your messaging, which brings us nicely to the next slide. The real challenge here is to express your value proposition in one clear sentence. And the work that we've just done, so collecting the information, thinking about the different dimensions, about the customers, why, their needs, the additional value that you provide, is the most important part of the messaging process. It builds the foundation for all future work in order to craft concise, consistent, and compelling messaging. And we have come up with a 7-step process that brings you to this, or that brings you from ideas to consistent messaging. You can, and the work that we've just done with you during this webinar now are normally step 1 to 2, which are the most important ones of the process. Afterwards, we would look at how we can turn these information into consistent and compelling messaging concepts and ideas. If you want to know more about that, feel free to reach out to us.
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you, Jan. So congratulations, you're coming to the end of your brand building process. So it's time to put your findings into practice and learn how you actually can live your brand. So the scale of the implementation, I guess, will depend very much on your stage of development as a company and what this process might have revealed in terms of the strength of your brand, your existing brand. So for some, it might be a case of just taking a new element that you've developed and incorporating that into your brand, or perhaps you found the work on your value proposition to be something that's actually missing. And now you want to look at your messaging again, your marketing materials or presentations, to make sure that the value you offer is clearly stated. For others, it might be a complete rework, a total overhaul of your brand. And obviously this can be daunting, in addition to being time consuming and potentially expensive. But particularly if you're at this stage where you're starting to focus seriously on sales or fundraising or accessing new markets, as we mentioned at the beginning, brand is essential and kind of worth investing the time and energy in early on. So in terms of living your brand, so I touched earlier on working with creatives. So this is part of living your brand. So it will become significantly easier once you've gone through the process and the steps we've outlined. Particularly, as I mentioned, with having this set of brand attributes and a clearly defined mission statement. It allows copywriters, designers, even developers to understand who you are really quickly, and any creative work that's produced is likely to be much more aligned with what you were thinking. So when you're briefing designers, one of our kind of tips would be to, on top of letting them know your brand attributes and mission statement or value proposition, is to include your competitors and a list of kind of no-goes in terms of the colors or styles that perhaps your founder or your team just really don't like. You can also include examples of brands that you do really like. So yeah, I think the other thing is to have an open mind. It's okay to have things you really don't want or brands you like, but it's important to let the designer kind of use their creative flair to turn your company's why into a compelling visual identity. So try not to have kind of fixed ideas of what this should look like, and you might be pleasantly surprised with what your creatives come up with. So in addition to your outward-looking brand, you also have a secondary brand, and this is how you're viewed as an employer. And we call this your employer brand, and it lives and breathes in the minds of your former, current, and future employees. So as we know, today's job market is increasingly competitive, especially in the clean tech space. You know, most of the newer kind of generations coming into work are really keen to work for a company which you know, is doing something mission related. So a positive employer brand is becoming more and more critical. So as with all branding, crafting a strong employer brand is about good storytelling. It's about how you want your organization to be perceived in the job marketplace using specific messaging to attract the right people. But it's also about living that story. So in other words, happy employees are your greatest employer brand asset. So the brand work we've outlined today can help you start thinking about how you want to craft your company culture. So perhaps through the exercises, you realize that the thing that makes you stand out is that dedication we talked about, but maybe also transparency. And so this is a really good starting point for figuring out your company values and the types of employees you want to attract. Another kind of tip for internal comms is one thing we always do after our client workshops, which we mentioned, is we actually gift our clients a poster with the 3 brand attributes that we've come up with. And the idea is that that can be hung, I mean, in offices at the moment, that's kind of up in the air, but basically somewhere where the whole team can see it. If you make your company values highly visible, they'll be at the forefront of your team's mind. And it's a good reminder to help, you know, that people are reminded all the time of what the company stands for.
So we have started this webinar with a very simple question, why? And this question has led us all the way from brand attributes and allowed us to shape our value proposition. And as Fiona has just pointed out, the brand literally translates into everything we do. And that's in fact much more than just a logo. And with that, we'll open up for your questions.
So yeah, as we mentioned earlier, you can just put any questions into the Q&A box.
Hey Fiona, hey Jan, can you hear me?
Yeah.
We can hear you.
Cool. We'll start off with first question then. So the question is, how do I decide whether it is better to develop what I already have or to start over and do a rebranding project?
Well, that's a tough one. Fiona, do you want to start on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on, you know, the state of your current brand, so how you feel about it. I mean, I think, like I mentioned earlier, you know, this is a good process, maybe even just to audit your brand and to figure out like what's missing, what's strong, what's weak. It might be that, you know, you don't have any of the answers at the moment, in which case it really is building it from the ground up. But perhaps there's elements that are really good and you can kind of work from there. I think if you've already got like a visual brand, again, it kind of depends on how people feel about it. And we often work with clients who are quite attached to elements of their visual brand. And there's definitely ways of just modernizing and kind of bringing that up to the quality of the offering and aligning it more with what the customer's needs are and without completely overhauling.
And maybe just to add, I would almost like I look at buildings, houses, apartments. And so when you want to move in somewhere and you start renovating, you think about, well, which parts do I want to leave the way they are? And do I want to take out a wall somewhere to reshape the room? Do I want to build a new wall? Which structures do I need to change? Does the roof need changing? And so on and so on. You know, sometimes it's just a bit of fresh paint and the job feels done and it feels like a completely new place. So in the end, to that, to buildings and apartments, to think about what can be still there, which foundations can be reused or can be used to build the new brand on top of. Sometimes it might also be the case that you say, it worked while it lasted, but now it's time to tear the whole thing down, to rebuild it from scratch. That might be the easier option sometimes. I would say it really depends.
Cool. Keep your questions coming in, everyone. We've got another one here. How can employees be involved in the brand development process so that they feel really connected to it?
I think, like we mentioned, so when we talked about the brand attributes exercise, which is part of a workshop we offer, but also can easily be done. And that's why we showed you how to do it. It could only take an hour or a couple of hours. And I think getting as many people involved at that point is a really nice way for people to feel their voices being heard. And I think especially getting everyone from every department, because oftentimes, people from finance or engineering have different feelings about brand than the marketers. So I think that's a really good starting point, is just to involve them in that, because they might have historically not been involved with those types of things at other companies. And then I think whoever's involved, I think, one thing to say is there probably should be someone who's responsible for this process, whether that's a project managing it essentially. And I think another nice way is just to really keep people up to date, and whether you have Slack or some other or Teams or whatever it is, and just updating people on how the process is going, and maybe during team meetings just showing the progress of the brand. I don't think there needs to be feedback rounds at every stage, but just showing people how it's evolving is a really nice way to involve the whole team.
Yeah, and I think, just as we've pointed out, that brand is so much more than just a logo, and that it touches on all aspects of the company's work and field of business. I think it's important to involve the teams at the stages that Fiona has pointed out. So it's not just the job for the C-level and maybe the brand manager, but the wider team.
Cool. Another question here. What can B2B companies learn from B2C ones when it comes to brand?
Well, maybe I can start. That's an interesting one. I think from my perspective, something that I touched upon in talking about the audience is that B2C companies are obviously much more focused on the end customer, to really understand them and to understand their needs, and whether it's electric mobility manufacturers that manufacture cars, or whether it's a company in the sustainable cosmetics industry, for example. It's really about understanding the individuals, their needs, their desires. And I think that's something that clean tech companies can really learn, especially since their value or their business is often B2B2C, so they don't have direct end customer contact, but ultimately their solutions affect our way of living and improve our way of living, make it more sustainable. So I think it's really important to make that connection, think about what the technical solutions ultimately do for the end customer, and maybe be more vocal about that than in the past. That's not just technology focused, it's the incremental improvement of a process, but that it's a really life-changing solution that clean tech companies provide.
Yeah, and I think just building on that, I think that's exactly the case. I think because B2C companies are forced to connect with customers directly, because that's their market, and it really makes them try and connect on a more emotional level than perhaps B2B. And I think a lot of our favorite brands who we talked about today, and just in general, are they're not afraid to be quite bold. And I think especially with the sustainable and mission-driven companies, purpose-driven companies, they really put it out there. Like they really say, like, I don't know, thinking of like Oatly, for example, is the classic example, but they really wear their value on their sleeve, their values on their sleeve, and people really connect with that. I think, yeah, B2C brands tend to be more bold and ambitious and kind of out there, and I think there's no reason why B2B clean tech companies can't be a bit more bold and creative as well. Because at the end of the day, like we talked about at the very beginning, people connect with why, and whether that's the owner of a business, or if it's the end customer.
Nice, thanks for that, you two. Another question here. Do we really need to involve the whole team in the brand process, especially if we're working to a tight deadline?
Well, I think the short answer is yes, but maybe we have a more elaborate one from Fiona, our brand manager.
Yeah, I think it is really important. And we kind of touched on it in one of the other questions, but yeah, it's just not going to be a true representation of who you are if you don't include everyone. And I think it's okay not to include everyone in the later stages, but I think it's really important with particularly the brand attributes, because that's, as I say, where this kind of personality comes out. It could be as well with the why question. It could be really as simple as just asking everyone what their why is, and why they're working at the company and what they see the why as being. And I think it doesn't need to be time consuming, but it is really, really important. And again, just from there, it doesn't have to involve everyone, but in the beginning, I think it's very important.
And maybe, yeah, just to add to that, I would always argue and question the urgency. So if you're on a really tight deadline, obviously we understand that, but the question is really, do you want to rush a process that is so important and that strategic for your company? If the answer is yes, then one might have to adapt. But then often the answer, once that question has been asked and whether the deadline has actually been challenged, the answer surprisingly is often that the need isn't that strong to meet the deadline. So that's something more artificial. We really want to point out that the branding process is one of the most important strategic aspects of your company's positioning. So if you don't want to do it twice, you ought to get it right in the first place. Then there's no need to rush it.
Yeah, I was just thinking that as you were saying, I mean, we've often seen clients who've rushed this process, and then they do end up having to do it again. So it might feel like there's no time, or you need to do it quickly, but you will end up having to do it. The time will, it will add more time in the long run, essentially. So I think that's a really good point from Jan.
I think also, I mean, we often get inquiries from companies that said, we've tried to do it that way and it didn't work out, but here are our results. Can we fix this within the next 2 weeks, and so on? There's, as Fiona said, there's always the question of whether can we reuse all of it, or do we need to start from scratch? And yeah, those conversations are really important. It's important to keep in mind that take the time to think about it, to also let it sink in, to process your findings, because often they're quite revolutionary for you, especially the brand attributes exercise. It's those 3 simple words have quite a strong impact on your company, and just to reflect upon that and let the process take the time it demands. And maybe, Lee, I know we have a number of additional questions, but looking at the time, maybe we can have 1 or 2 more questions, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. I've got a couple more here, and then we can wrap up around it in about 5 minutes. So one here, do you have any tips for expressing your value proposition?
Well, yeah, maybe I can answer that. I think my one tip would be that it's, again, a really complex undertaking. It takes time, and it takes the brains of many to come up with the one sentence that says it all. I think that's one of the most critical aspects, and where we also as a team work together to really find that one sentence for the clients and the partners that we work with to express their value proposition in the best possible terms. It gets especially challenging when you work in not just one language, but for example, we often work with German and English speaking companies, and there the expression of the value proposition needs to work in not just one language, but two or more. And for that, it's great to have people on your team that have differing native languages. So we have French, English, German, and so on the team. So we can really capture that and express it in whatever language is relevant for you. So I think that's, again, it takes time, effort, and expertise to get it right.
Yeah, I think my really quick tip would also be like, people need to get, your customers, most importantly, need to get what you do and who you are very quickly. So it should be, you can also ask around. It can be people who know, and a good thing is to ask people who don't know anything about clean tech. Show them your value proposition and ask them what they think, and is it easy to understand? Do they, because I think often with clients we see it can become quite complicated because people, the founders want to say everything about what makes their technology so different and unique. And obviously, again, that's coming back to the what and the how, but the value proposition should really encompass the why. And I think it's important that people understand what you do very quickly.
Yeah, maybe one final comment on that. I would say both the work around the brand attributes and the work around expressing your value proposition in one sentence demands founders, C-level, or whoever makes the decisions to be bold and courageous, because those three words often feel like they can't express the whole company in just three words, and same the technology and the vision in one sentence. But that is the purpose. And if you can't do that, then you haven't done it right yet. And I think just that tension between having to limit it really to a few words while wanting to say it all is challenging. But once you've solved it, you will feel it. And that's one of the most magic moments in working in clean tech and communications, to really get the feeling, yep, now we have it and let's move forward. That's powerful.
Yeah, just one final comment, sorry about that. I think the other thing as well is, remember, you can say other things on the website or in your presentations or in your brochures. I think sometimes people get with the brand attributes, it's like, oh God, but if we remove sustainable, we can't use the word sustainable on our website. But that's not the case. It's important to remember that you can go into more detail and more explanation in other types of messaging, but this is about the kind of outward facing. Maybe it's the first thing people see on your website, or it's on your business card, or whatever it is. So don't worry about including different words or more explanation in different contexts.
Perfect. Well, I think we have time for one last question, Lee.
Yeah, one more, and it's quite a philosophical sounding question, but let's keep it to a brand context. Is it better to fit in or to stand out?
That is a very philosophical one. I would always argue it's better to stand out. I think in clean tech, we challenge the status quo. We don't accept the way things are being done at the moment. We strive for a better tomorrow, a more sustainable world. And that means that things need to change. And for things to change, I think it needs people that are courageous and that want to be bold and that want to be different and that want to stand out. So I think for clean tech brands, it's important to stand out here.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, yeah, for me, it's a no-brainer. I mean, there maybe are certain things you have to include in, say, your pitch deck or something to kind of fit in with what's required for investors, or maybe there's some other similar thing. But I mean, you just have to think about your favorite brands and how they made you feel. Again, you know, just thinking about B2C brands, and you'll know that they stand out for one reason or another. So I think, yeah, it's always important to stand out.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for all your questions. We just had a final one. We will post the recording of our webinar later on our YouTube channel, and we'll also email you the recording after the webinar. So if you want to revisit some of the exercises or want to listen to how to go about the brand attributes exercise, you'll have the recording to support you with that. Well, again, thank you so much for all the questions. There's two final things that we wanted to share with you. One is that we're really happy to support you on your journey to find your why, your brand attributes, your value proposition, whatever it might be. And for the participants of the webinar, we're offering free consultations to the first 3 companies to email us at the email address you see there on the screen, mail@lifesizemedia.com. We're happy to support you with whatever your current communication challenges might be at the moment. Again, email us at mail@lifesizemedia.com if you want to sign up for a free consultation. Also, we have summarized our tips and tricks around creating a powerful brand in a brand new white paper that launches actually today. So we'll email you the link after the webinar. Make sure to download it. It has a lot of practical exercises to help you shape your brand and your value proposition. We hope you're going to enjoy the read. And with that, thank you so much for attending our webinar. Thank you so much for all your questions, and we'll be in touch soon.
Thank you, everyone.